let's refer to this drawing. This drawing, I apologize for the crudeness of it. I'm not quite the visual artiste if any of your timeline is. But I wanted to show you an illustration of maybe it would help your comprehension level. So what you're looking at is timelines. I put in 4 timelines here because usually the timelines go in bunches of 4s. This right here is the timeline we're in right now. It's a premonition timeline. These are alternate timelines that are similar to this one, but they're influenced differently. Alright? This here is the crash point for the timelines. Alright, you have other bunches of 4 coming into this. I'm just not showing it. So it actually would expand out like a big circle coming into this point. Alright, all the way around. But for the purpose of this drawing, I just did one section. And when it hits this crash point, they all blend in together. This is the premonition timeline that we're concerned with, though. This is where we're at. And this is the one that we're being gauged by. I should have made it bigger, but, you know, it doesn't look bigger. Alright, now, this is the time expansion, where the time loops and the spiritual execution take place. It seems like it's only a minute or so, but it's actually quadrillions of millennia happening between this point and this point, which is the restore point, sans the sifted out. There's no subhumans who could be controlled by subspirits beyond here. You know, beyond this line right here. Okay? This is where the millennial reign begins. It's a decompression timeline, where those who are going to graduate go before going to the real world. Meanwhile, all those who do not exist don't make it past this line right here, because this is a time expansion, and what they did in this premonition timeline, they give account for. Alright? There's millions of millennia and mere moments right there. Ultimate time manipulation, forwards and backwards simultaneously. This is something that their computers and their D-Wave computers will never accomplish. But it's something that Yahweh, Yeshua, and his impersonator, Lucifer, their computers can accomplish it. Because right now we're in a simulation mechanism. This is the simulation mechanism computer, aka control grid. Just to give you an example. These 3 things here represent sub-spirits. There's more than 3, okay? But I put 3 here just to make it fit in the drawing to compete up against the 3 down here. But there's a whole lot more here. So there's a whole lot more of these little lines coming from their ability to influence what's here, okay? They do not have bodies. They're jealous. They can't have sex with human women. And they're jealous. Because they don't have bodies like the fallen angels and Lucifer. And they can't separate from the control grid to be just full-blown spirits. So they can't possess women like devils. Now, I didn't put the devils in here because we're dealing with opposing forces right now. Spiritual wickedness in high places and God. And the devils are kind of, they're neutral. Some of them are controlled opposition, like the one that gave Tesla the ability to save the world from what's been done to it over the last 100 years. It only takes 100 years of stealing the coolant out of a mechanism, you know, the oil, and burning it into the atmosphere to destabilize everything and magnetize it to the sun, warp the orbit. So these sub-spirits don't have bodies. They're on a mutiny campaign against God, Christ, and Lucifer, and their conjoined agendas. They have conjoined agendas. Now, on this side, and this is why, okay, they're in groups of 4. On this side of the groups of timelines, and the premonition timeline, the other ones may have premonition timelines too, alright? But we're in this one. And what we have happening in these timelines is God, Christ, and Lucifer. The deity clone, and controlled opposition, non-deity, deity impersonator, Lucifer. Their influence, it's all positive frequency resonance, reaches up to the timeline. They reach to that timeline. Then their influence is diluted. It goes to that timeline, diluted. Gets diluted a little more as it goes to that timeline. As you can see, there's almost like a visual break in it as it gets to our timeline. That represents what the sub-spirits are doing. Okay, now you look at their influence, how it reaches our timeline. It gets weaker as it gets to the next timeline. Even weaker as it gets to this timeline. And by the time it gets to the timeline closest to the deities, that influence has been tapered off. It doesn't make it. Alright? Now, in this timeline, they want the breakage of the chakra. They want you despiritualized. They want you transhumanized to where you're like these sub-spirits. They're part spirit and they're part artificial intelligence. You would think, wow, these are dysfunctional, but that's their function. Their function is to do what they're doing. They're sending their influence into the timeline, into the people that they have had their DNA via GMO, chemtrails, water, and frequency imbalance. They have had themselves, the humans have been prepared for reception of the frequencies of the sub-spirits. Now, those who are more receptive to this influence, they make it beyond this line into the millennial for decompression. Those who are connected to this influence, they don't make it past this line. This is where they go. They're here. And then they don't exist for the restore point here, which is it replays time from where the non-existence stopped existing, where they were born. Okay, so as far back as we have to go to get rid of non-existence in the spirit scan, however many thousands of years we have to go back, that's how far back it goes. We don't go back to that primitive era. We have Tesla's invention, free energy from the ionosphere. That wasn't really Tesla's, it was Lucifer's, but it was given to Tesla. Those of you who don't know, they made marijuana illegally, violated the Constitution because, well, they're terrorists. And they want to make it all about, oh, it's a drug and it's getting high, but it's about more than that, it's about fuel. They're trying to do away with competing fuels because, well, they want to destabilize the world and make it burn up. They want that crash point prophecy to happen without Lucifer and God's intervention. Somewhere in here, we're in here right now. This is where we're at. We're right before the crash point. Lucifer comes back into our timeline. He comes back into the mechanism. Into this timeline. He's been gone for 2,000 years. Right before they crucified Christ, he was gone, so he couldn't be credited with it. Lucifer will come back here pretending to be Christ for a growing season. Right around in here, before Lucifer comes back, we're going to have double sickles happen. The result of the influence of the sub-spirits. The inclement weather and earthquakes and maybe even a pole shift so that the sun will rise in the west. And it's going to kill off a lot who would be resistant to Christ. Now this here, if you can visualize that these are timelines. And like in this timeline here, I was telling you about an alternative timeline where things are a little bit better. I think it's like over here, where Vinny and all the people you're supposed to hook up with connected and stuff. And see, these other timelines don't have Lucifer coming to them. Now, if the other bunches of timelines that are all around, if they have a premonition timeline in them, then Lucifer will be going to that one timeline in those bunches. But those bunches may not have anything to do with any of this. They're just connected to where, okay, everything comes back together and it goes back in here. We're not exploring the other ones right now. We may go into that later. But for now, we need to get a grasp on what's right here. We're getting influence, dribble over influence from better case scenarios of ourselves. Sometimes in dreams, sometimes in weird, what we would consider strange unctions or desires. An urge to do something that seems non-traditional, defies what's popular, that kind of thing. These timelines are better case scenario timelines. They don't require the intervention of Lucifer, but our timeline does. For us to have the judgment and the tribulation, the final sifting. Otherwise, the sub-spirits to get what they want, and the crash point happens without him getting the benefit of coming back here to reign as Christ for a growing season, to reign as the Son, the clone of God.